The first time I started doubting my wife's faithfulness was after our son Matt's 13th birthday. On my way home from work that day, I picked up some photographs from the drugstore. Julia hadn't returned home yet, so I decided to relax and go through the pictures. It had been a memorable day. Matt was ecstatic when he walked in and found a surprise party with all his friends waiting for him. As I flipped through the photos, I saw one that caught my eye, a close-up of Matt and my lifelong friend, Steve. The two were smiling side by side. Steve has always been like family. My kids call him Uncle Steve, and his kids call me Uncle John. Our bond runs that deep. But this photo made me pause. Their similarities were striking. Both had the same black hair, identical green eyes, and narrow noses. Even their skin tone and facial features seemed eerily alike. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn Steve was Matt's father. Continuing to sift through the photos, another image drew my attention. It was of the kids at the party, but in the background, I noticed something troubling. Julia and Steve were standing close, in what could only be described as an intimate pose. It looked as though they had either just kissed or were about to. Alarmed, I searched the other pictures for more evidence of them together, but found nothing else. I discreetly removed the two pictures that had unsettled me and tucked them into a drawer in my home office. While these images didn't prove anything outright, the resemblance between Matt and Steve, coupled with that intimate-looking photo of Julia and Steve, left me uneasy. My mind raced, wondering if there had been other signs of unfaithfulness I'd overlooked. Before I could dwell further, Julia walked through the door, greeted me with a kiss, and headed upstairs to change. Her routine was so ordinary, so practiced, that it was hard to imagine she might be hiding something. But with suspicion now gnawing at me, I decided to follow her. When I entered the bedroom, Julia appeared surprised but not upset by my presence. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" she asked casually as she changed into her usual house clothes. "Not too bad," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I picked up the pictures from Matt's party on the way home. They turned out great, but don't you think we went a little overboard with 5 rolls of film for one birthday party? After all the effort we put into making him think there wasn't going to be a party, only to surprise him like that, I wanted to make sure we captured everything, Julia explained. It was nice inviting everyone, his friends, family, and even Steve, Mary, and their kids, I said, watching her closely. At the mention of Steve's name, I thought I saw a slight reaction. Was it a natural movement, or had she flinched? "Yeah, it was a great party," she said, her tone steady. Beyond that possible flinch, there was nothing else to go on. Still, I resolved to keep an eye on Julia and Steve to see if there was anything more between them. At first, I didn't use any high-tech methods. No cameras, no audio recordings, no phone tapping. I simply started keeping tabs on Julia's whereabouts. If she said she was going somewhere, I'd call to confirm she was there. A few weeks later, a tragic local event provided an unexpected opportunity. A missing young girl's body had been found in the lake, and her family had used DNA records to identify her remains, which were badly damaged. Julia brought it up during dinner. "John, I think we should get DNA profiles made for our kids," she said. "If something ever happened and, well, if a body or even just a part of one were found, I'd want to know if it was ours." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. In that poor girl's case, normal identification methods wouldn't have worked. Having the kids' DNA on file is a smart precaution. I offered to take all 4 of our children, Matt, Ashley, Hannah, and Sarah, to get their DNA samples collected. This suggestion wasn't entirely altruistic. Deep down, I saw it as an opportunity to confirm or dismiss the troubling thoughts that had been plaguing me since Matt's birthday, at the family doctor's office. I decided it was the right time to make a request. "So, John, what brings you here today?" Dr. Smith asked, looking at me curiously. "I'd like copies of the DNA tests we had done," I explained. "It's not that I don't trust the county to keep the information safe in case it's needed, but I'd feel more comfortable having my own copy secured at home." "Of course, John. That's a common request from parents," Dr. Smith replied reassuringly. 2 weeks later, I went on a business trip out of town. While there, I visited a doctor's office carrying DNA results related to another situation. "Doctor," I began, "a woman I lived with for 8 years is claiming I'm the father of her 4 children and is now demanding child support. I have my doubts that I'm the biological father of one or more of them. She's refused to provide DNA records, so I'm here to determine which children, if any, I'm financially responsible for." The doctor, who seemed familiar with such cases, gave me a sympathetic nod. "It's unfortunate when paternity is called into question. I've seen families torn apart by these situations. Just to confirm, are you still in a relationship with this woman?" she asked. "No," I replied. "We ended things 3 years ago. I'm married to someone else now, and these claims are causing significant frustration." By the time I returned home on Friday night, I had an envelope with the results but hadn't opened it yet. As I approached the house, a sense of dread settled over me. When I walked in, I found a note on the table from Julia. She had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend. Unable to bear waiting any longer, I decided to open the envelope after calming my nerves with a glass of scotch. When I finally read the results, I was stunned. None of the 4 children were biologically mine. What was even more shocking was that all 4 shared the same biological father. I poured another drink, my mind racing. By 4 a.m., I'd fallen asleep on the couch, only to wake up hours later consumed by thoughts of what to do next. My suspicions about Steve being their father grew stronger, but I needed concrete evidence. Determined, I decided to take a more advanced approach. On Saturday morning, I visited a nearby store specializing in surveillance equipment. I purchased everything I needed: motion-activated cameras, audio recorders, and GPS tracking devices. By the afternoon, I had installed cameras throughout the house and set up sound recorders. I even placed tracking devices in Julia's car and Steve's SUV, ensuring I could monitor their movements in real time. All the data was linked to a computer in the basement, which I could access remotely. That afternoon, Steve stopped by, and I seized the opportunity to install the tracker on his SUV while pretending to spend time with him. Since Julia was away for the weekend, I knew Steve wouldn't be with her, at least not then. On Sunday morning, I searched Julia's belongings for anything incriminating. While her computer appeared clean, and she didn't seem to keep a diary, I did find some unfamiliar lingerie tucked away in the back of her closet. It was yet another unsettling detail to add to the growing pile of evidence. When Julia returned home with the kids that evening, I greeted them warmly, masking my turmoil. That night, as we lay in bed, Julia caught me off guard. "John, I think I might be pregnant," she said softly. "Pregnant?" I repeated, unable to hide my surprise. "Yes," she confirmed. "I'm planning to visit the doctor tomorrow to confirm, but I have a strong feeling." Her announcement sent my mind spinning. Julia and I had struggled for years to conceive Matt, going through countless efforts and heartbreak. Yet now, without any planning, she claimed to be pregnant again. The timing seemed suspicious. The next day, I drove to a clinic in a neighboring town where no one knew me and requested a fertility test. When the results came back, they revealed that my sperm count was well above average. This new information only deepened my doubts. We had faced so many difficulties conceiving in the past, yet now Julia was claiming an effortless pregnancy. It didn't add up. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together, and the picture it painted was one of betrayal. It became undeniably clear that Steve was the one who had fathered Julia's child. Feeling a mix of rage and betrayal, I hurried back to my workplace and reviewed the data collected so far. The tracking devices revealed that Steve would leave for work, only to drive to a hotel on the east side of town. Julia's car, after stopping at the doctor's office, would also head to the same hotel. The pieces were falling into place, but the sight of their vehicles at the same location was enough for me. That evening, Julia was overjoyed as she shared the news of her pregnancy, gushing about how fortunate we were to be expecting another child. I, however, was fighting the urge to confront her with everything I knew. Over the following weeks, I continued gathering evidence, which painted a clear picture of their routine. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, they would meet for extended lunch breaks at the same hotel, always booking the same room. I didn't need to see what happened behind closed doors. Their frequent rendezvous spoke volumes. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, they would meet at our home and use the guest bedroom for their escapades. Watching all of this unfold was agonizing, and it took every ounce of restraint not to confront them immediately. After 2 months of monitoring, I came across a recorded phone call that drove me to the edge. "Are you okay to talk?" Steve asked. "Yeah," Julia replied casually. "John's out playing golf, and the kids are at their friends' places. I've been worried about John lately. He's been acting differently. Do you think there's any chance he knows?" Steve asked, sounding concerned. Julia dismissed the idea. "He hasn't figured out anything for years. Why would he suddenly start now?" Steve's voice softened. "You know, Matt's starting to resemble me more every day." Julia laughed. "Exactly. And John still thinks I'm the perfect wife. He'd never suspect me of cheating, let alone realize that for the past 15 years, I've ensured all my children are fathered by you, not him." Steve hesitated. "I'm not sure how I feel about that, Julia." Julia's tone turned cold. "Take it back, or you'll never touch me again." All right. I take it back," Steve said, trying to appease her. "I can't wait until Monday." "Monday won't work," Julia replied. "I have an important lunch meeting, but Tuesday should be fine. We'll just make it a long lunch." "What time should I come over?" Steve asked. "Around 11. See you then," Julia concluded. I listened to that conversation on a Sunday evening. The next day, I gathered all the evidence I'd collected. Photos of them entering and leaving hotels, video recordings, and audio of their phone calls. I made my way to an attorney's office, determined to file for divorce. "So, John, what grounds for divorce are you citing?" Dave, the attorney, asked. "Marital infidelity," I replied firmly. Dave raised an eyebrow. "That can be tough to prove in this state. Are you certain you have enough evidence?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but resolute. "I have photographs of my wife and her lover entering hotel rooms, videos of them in compromising positions, and phone recordings where my wife admits to having children with her lover instead of me. And if that's not enough, I have DNA results confirming that none of the 4 children I've raised are biologically mine." Dave nodded, clearly impressed. "That's more than enough. I'll draft the divorce papers and have them sent to your wife immediately." I approached my lawyer with a precise plan. "Can we schedule the delivery of the divorce papers at a specific time and place?" I asked. "What do you have in mind?" Dave replied, "Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, she plans to meet her lover at our house. Could we arrange for her to receive the papers at around 11:30 or 11:45? Catching her in the act would provide undeniable proof," I suggested. "That's a strategic approach," Dave admitted. "Do you have other plans in mind? Would it be permissible to invite her parents, siblings, a few close friends, her lover's wife, and possibly their employers under the pretense of a surprise party?" I asked. Dave chuckled. "You're looking for a bit of poetic justice, aren't you? As long as they don't know what's happening in advance, calling it a surprise party should be fine." "Perfect," I concluded. After leaving Dave's office, I made several phone calls, inviting everyone except Mary to the celebration in Julia's honor. Leaving Mary out ensured Steve wouldn't be tipped off and canceled their meeting. At 10:45 the following morning, I called Mary and invited her to my house for a chat. Meanwhile, the invited guests gathered quietly outside, waiting for the signal. "Julia's resting inside," I explained to them. "Let's sneak in and surprise her." Dave stood ready with the divorce papers as we all crept into the house. We headed straight for the guest bedroom. With a swift motion, I flung the door open and we all yelled, "Surprise!" The reactions were explosive. Julia and Steve were caught red-handed, stunned and speechless. Mary immediately erupted at Steve. Julia's family, furious and humiliated, turned their anger on her. Julia began sobbing uncontrollably, attempting to shield herself with a bedsheet. Steve scrambled to collect his clothes, but his boss, who had also been invited, blocked his escape. Amid the chaos, Dave calmly stepped forward. In a clear, authoritative tone, he addressed Julia. Julia Davis, you are hereby served with divorce papers filed by your husband, John Davis. He is seeking a divorce on the grounds of adultery. Mr. Davis is not seeking custody of the 4 children or the child you are carrying, as DNA testing confirms he is not the biological father of any of them. Additionally, a recorded conversation between you and Steve Wilson reveals that you intentionally prevented Mr. Davis from fathering your children, choosing instead to conceive with Mr. Wilson. Mr. Davis is claiming 90% of the marital estate. Unless you agree to these terms, a court date will be set. Good day. Dave's delivery was cold and robotic, further emphasizing the gravity of the moment. He handed the papers to Julia and left the room. The fallout was swift. Both Julia and Steve lost their jobs. Steve's marriage to Mary ended in divorce. Julia's family, who had always held me in high regard, disowned her completely. While I did receive the full 90% of the estate, I settled for 75%. Additionally, I won a separate lawsuit against Steve for the emotional and financial harm he caused by preventing me from having children of my own. My love for Julia had once been profound, but her betrayal ran too deep. Knowing the extent of her deceit and cruelty made it easier to sever ties completely. Occasionally, I still see her around town. She tries to apologize, but I refuse to engage. Her actions were unforgivable. For years, she manipulated me, stole the chance for me to have my own children, and deceived me into believing I was their father. Despite everything, I cherished the good memories I had with the children. They were devastated to learn the truth, that their Uncle Steve was their biological father, and that their cousins were, in fact, their half-siblings. The revelation was hard on them, and they spent significant time in therapy. Julia's actions not only destroyed our marriage, but also caused irreparable damage to her relationships with the children. They still call me Daddy when they see me, a bittersweet reminder of the bond we once shared. Julia, on the other hand, must live with the consequences of her choices and the knowledge that her own children resent her for what she did.